6. John chapter 6 is where we're going to be looking as we get ready for the Lord's table. Never really thought about doubling up for the Lord's Supper, and singing is like one of the most ultimate benefits, because I can totally tailor a Lord's table talk to what we're going to be singing about. And what we're going to be talking about later in our sermon. John chapter 6 is one of those really interesting chapters. We just covered Matthew's account in it in our auditorium class on Sunday mornings. And that's over in Matthew chapter 14. And this passage often gets brought up because it's similar. Let's see what details this other gospel mentions. But we know that the beginning of chapter 6 is very similar to Matthew 14. Jesus feeds the 5,000 men, as we've added that little extra to clarify. And then Jesus miraculously does this work, and then the disciples pick up all the leftovers, I guess it would be, and there's 12 baskets full of leftovers. Then Jesus walks on water, which strangely John doesn't discuss much. He just kind of says it very matter-of-factly that, and that's something Jesus did. But then we come to a very powerful discourse between Jesus and the Jews, beginning in verse 22, if you don't mind joining me there. The next day, the crowd that had stayed on the other side of the sea saw that there had only been one boat, and they also saw that Jesus hadn't boarded that boat with his disciples, but that his disciples had gone off alone. Some boats from Tiberias came near the place where they had eaten the bread after the Lord had given thanks. And when the crowd saw that neither Jesus nor his disciples were there, they got into boats and went to Capernaum, looking for Jesus. And when they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" And Jesus answered, "Truly I tell you, you are looking for me, not because you saw the signs, but because you ate the loaves and were filled. So don't work for the food that perishes, but for the food that lasts for eternal life, which the Son of Man will give to you, because God the Father has set his seal of approval on him." If you've read this discourse before between Jesus and these Jews, you realize the entire time they don't really care about who Jesus is or what he's doing, except for the fact that he can make food for them. You see this repeatedly. Jesus will ask a question, and then they'll answer with some odd response that kind of shows their heart. Or they will ask him a question, and Jesus just cuts to the point and says, well, let's take this earthly thing that you're concerned about and give it a spiritual application. What's really powerful is when we come down to verse 35, Jesus very plainly says, "I am the bread of life. No one who comes to me will ever be hungry. No one who believes in me will ever be thirsty again. But as I told you, you've seen me, and yet you don't believe. Everyone the Father gives me will come to me, and the one who comes to me I will never cast out. For I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me." And sometimes we read this passage in context of the Lord's Supper. And we see, clearly Jesus is talking about the Lord's Supper here. Let me go ahead and just get that out of the way. No, he's not. But it is remarkably striking language to the Lord's Supper, is it not? That Jesus uses this analogy of the manna all the way back in the book of Exodus to make his point, saying, "I am the bread of life." As we are tailoring a lot of our thought around refuge and safety in the arms of Jesus, Jesus here says, "I am all that you need to sustain yourself upon." A fun tidbit of history for those of you that enjoy history, if you didn't know, meat was not all that common. Bread is what people ate all the time. You had it with everything. Kind of like whenever you go to a Mexican restaurant and you get that free thing of chips and salsa. Imagine that level at every meal. Wouldn't that get old after a while? Okay, yeah, I kind of agree. Especially if you have good salsa, it doesn't get old after a while. But when you think about these people need food to survive, food will fuel and fill you for longer. Jesus says, I'm the kind of bread that you need, that you will never be hungry again. And when you tie this in with John 4 with the woman at the well, he is the water of life, so that you may never thirst again. And so then Jesus decides to set up a couple of symbols for us as we come to the Lord's Supper, reminding us of his body that was broken in the form of bread, and his blood poured out for us in the form of grape juice, so that we might remember that we could not be here, literally, like physically, or spiritually, without the help of the Lord. For he is our one true sustainer, and he gave everything for us. So you can go ahead and switch it over to the songs now. Let me put this